I want to thank Jamie Boleyn for joining us, Assistant Dean for Career and Industry Engagement at the Bauer College of Business at University of Houston. She's going to be talking with you today about experiential learning at scale. And I met Jamie about a year ago, and I'm the founder of EduSourced. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David. I met Jamie about a year ago, a little more, maybe a year and a half, but I was actually blown away by the scale at which they operate PBL. And being as that I'm the founder of EduSource, you can probably imagine I talk to a lot of programs. I'm honestly not surprised very often, but this actually surprised me. So I thought it'd be amazing to get her on here to talk to you guys about her story, her program, some lessons learned, some things that have worked, some outcomes, and all of that. So Jamie, with that, I will turn it over to you and yeah, take it from here.
Thanks, David. So hi, everyone. Excuse me, as David said, we've got a rather big program. So give you a rough overview, then I'll give you some background on that. We do have a course that's focused on career development, figuring out your major, but also kind of growing into college. And it's offered the very first semester that a student enters our business school. And when we surveyed our employers to kind of say where are the challenges, and even when we surveyed our faculty to say where are the challenges, there were a whole lot of soft skill issues that students were having very early on. And we realized that transition from high school or community college to university was a tough move. And we needed something in there to kind of connect them to reality before they went into their major specific classes. And just to tell you a little bit about the University of Houston, specifically the Bauer College of Business, before we get into it, so you can get a sense of that scale that David was telling you about, we've got close to 6,000 undergraduate business students. About a third of them are their first in their families to go to college. About half of them work 20 or more hours a week while they're enrolled in school. 2/3 are on financial aid. About 2/3 are racial and ethnic minorities. And we are a tier 1 research university. So at least one of those elements probably applies to whoever you are. And the nice thing about this list that I want to give you is these are usually the reasons why people don't want to do project-based learning, because they're like, we've got so many other things that we're trying to overcome. We couldn't possibly take this on. You have no idea what we're dealing with. We have low budget. We have high enrollment. We have students with all sorts of special needs. And in our case, we're like, this is precisely why we need to do this. And before I get into what we do, I want to tell you what we accomplished so that you can understand why it matters, that we didn't just sling this together. I measure everything. So the actual outcomes, we saw a 62% increase in internship participation in our student body as a result of offering this program. And that's been sustained for the more than 10 years that we've been doing this. Our students were not focused on internships before. They were very focused on staying in their waitstaff jobs or their warehouse jobs that were paying the bills, and they didn't understand the value of doing an internship. So we have made that conversion since we've started doing this. We saw a 20% increase in students' confidence in their verbal presentation skills. So that was based on their self-report. Our 1-year retention rate improved by 8% when we first started doing this. And it continued to improve year after year as we got better, because what we found was the students felt more connected to the college. They felt more connected to the outcomes that they were going for. They made friends sooner. The class that we offer, some semesters we'd have 1,000 people in a section at a time. That we lost that room. Now we do a couple of sections of 500, but 70 to 80% of the students every single semester say one of their favorite things about the class is that they made a personal friend as a result of being in the class. We have had marriages that have come out of these group projects. But again, we know from the research that having these personal relationships help people stay connected to the college, make them graduate on time, make them more successful in college. Doing it at a large university is hard. This has worked. The other thing is our placement rate increased from about 38% when we started doing this. That's right, you heard it. Just over a third of them had jobs at graduation when we started doing this. Now we're consistently in the 90% for people having jobs within a few months of graduation. And that has been sustained for the past several years. It went up slowly over time as we changed the culture of the college, and those numbers have held. So we've gotten outcomes from doing this, even though it's, and I don't want to call it a freshman level course, it's a new student course. About 2/3 of our students transfer from community college as juniors, but they're juniors with a little extra time because it's going to take them a while to finish all their credits to graduate. So they may be a junior when they take the class, but they're still very new to university. And so We've had a lot of luck. The other thing is we also surveyed our employers before we were doing these projects and after we started doing the projects. And the employer perception of our students' soft skills went up dramatically after we started doing the projects. So not only did our students' self-perception change, but our ultimate consumers, the employers, they recognized a change in the skills of our students. And they also became more aware of the skills of our students because of their engagement. And so these are just some of the outcomes that we saw as a result of doing that. And I felt like I need to show you that before we talked about what we did, just so you know that I'm not just saying, let me tell you what I did. We got some results. So the way the class works is when you first come into the Bauer College, you're admitted as a pre-business student and you have to pass this class before you declare a major. And we do a lot of things in the class to help them figure out who they are, what they want to do, how they'll position themselves. We help them network with employers, participate in recruiting, all of that. But they also all participate in a group project. And the students have a choice. We'll have a section, we'll have about we have about 1,300 students in the fall that take the class, and spring's smaller. We only have about 900 in the spring. And we have about 40 to 50 projects that are sponsored by companies or nonprofits. And each of those projects will take about 8 students, and they're simple. They're things that don't require advanced electives. It could be, do a competitor analysis of our competition for their recruiting branding and how do we compare and how can we improve, or like we had an energy company do, look at our user interface for our app and make recommendations for improvement. So things that somebody without a lot of advanced electives can do the research, do the critical thinking, make a presentation and stand up and say, look what we found. We'll have 40 to 50 of those each semester. And then we'll also have a case competition running simultaneously. Students can opt in and choose to either do a sponsored project working for a nonprofit or a company, or to be on a case competition team. Now, to be clear, the case competition teams don't get off easy either. The difference there is you don't have a product that's deliverable to a client, but you do have a problem that you're working on and you have to make a presentation of your recommendations. You're still evaluated by corporate judges. And in the past, we would have the judges come in and there was like this big event and they would all kind of get feedback and network with the judges and all that. Now that we've gone online, thanks to EduSourced, we were able to get it online. We have alumni and corporate folks that mentor the teams throughout the semester and help them with their projects. And then we have other companies that will judge the team's final product. So everyone has to use critical thinking. Everyone has to use research. Everyone has to work together as a team. Everyone has to produce a final deliverable, and everybody gets feedback from a company. That's non-negotiable. That's going to happen. The format that you use, though, is up to you. Through EduSourced, what we've done is we're able to publish the list ahead of time to the students of these are the 40 or 50 different projects that are available. And if you're interested, you can bid on them. And we do like 3 rounds of bidding, and the students kind of opt in. And if they didn't get their choice or they didn't want to do it, they're automatically placed randomly into a team for the case competition. This is another thing we did on purpose. They don't get to pick their teammates. One of the challenges we found was kids were coming from community college and high school with their buddies, and they would get into a group with their buddies, and that old dynamic they had of, hey, Joe will do all the work. Yay, Joe, let's get in a group with Joe and Joe will do everything. They no longer could do that. They had to figure out how to navigate people they didn't know and work together, even if they had nothing in common and their schedules didn't mesh like reality. So they opt into the corporate, or they can opt into the case competition. Everybody has these same experiences in terms of working with companies. At the end of the semester, there's a deliverable. Throughout the semester, there are milestones they're turning in. There are surveys they're turning in. They're doing 360s of each other frequently. We found out a lot about judging and stuff like that. But we did manage to automate almost all of this through EduSourced. And so we have, with the 1,300 students, we have 2 professors that share the workload. And then we have some TAs. The other staffing we've done, we have a person in our office who manages the mentors for the case competitions now in terms of getting the volunteers and orienting them. And then we have another person that we use as a contractor that manages getting the projects and making sure the projects are staying on track. You don't have to use a contractor. For us, it worked better because we're able to basically do it based on deliverables. She has a target of however many projects we want. When she hits that target, we pay her. She serves as the primary contact. If there's a problem, like if our sponsor contact quits and we've got to find a replacement, she gets in the middle of that. But we do have those resources helping us. You don't have to do it that way. It's just the way that we approached it, and it's worked for us. So I feel like I've been kind of blah. David, what have I missed? You've heard the story a million times. What have I missed and what other people want to know?
Well, a couple of quick comments. So just for, I guess, formatting purposes, if you guys have questions as we go, please submit through the Q&A feature in Zoom. And what we'll do next is I'm going to read a couple of questions that were submitted ahead of time. So in my infinite wisdom, I only asked the audience to add questions at like the very end. So most of you had already registered. I apologize for that, but we'll have a lot of time for free-form Q&A. And then we will go into some moderated discussion to just talk through some points with Jamie about her program. So if you have questions, submit them as you go, and then we will address them as early as we can. So I broke one of my personal rules with Jamie, and that when I do these webinars, I usually don't like to go into a lot of Q&A before we go live. I like to wait, but I had a hard time waiting because this program seemed pretty unique. And Jamie, I think you hit the head on the nail on the head at the very beginning when you said, hey, these are some reasons why some schools say we can't do live employer projects in the classroom. I talked to a ton of schools. You're exactly right. That is often the case. Or it might be what a school would say, well, those are reasons why we can't do it in a big way. Maybe we can do it over here in this little corner, this elective, this co-curricular, but we can't blow this out. The big trend while there are a number of trends around experiential learning, but a trend I should say over the last couple of years is schools are scaling up. Their PBL might not be to 1,000 students at a time, but those numbers are growing and they run into operational challenges that even though maybe smaller number of students than what you have, really when you talk about your operational challenges, it's a lot of the same stuff. But anyway, before we get into a lot of depth on that, I did want to cover a couple of questions that were sent in ahead of time. So the first one's from Karen Larson at Discovery Partners Institute. And this is a couple questions kind of in one, so I'll just read it off to you. Delivery method, how to get all the projects needed for 2,000 students and the system needed to administer the program.
Okay. Getting it in the system was one of the best parts about moving to EduSourced because the clients put them in themselves and all we have to do is approve them. That part's nice. Getting the projects, I'm so glad you asked that because that's another thing we hear from people is, oh, where on earth do you find the projects? One of my roles at Bauer is to manage the Business Career Center. And one of the challenges we have in the Career Center is so many companies are coming to us saying, how can we get more involved? And we may or may not be able to hire more people, or we're really trying to target students that are freshmen and sophomores. We don't know how to reach them because they're not really engaged in student leadership yet. How can we get involved? Give us suggestions. Well, this is like easy to say, hey, if you want to sponsor a project with your company, you get to work with a team of 8 students all semester. Everyone gets to see your project in the beginning. They love it. And what's happening is when companies come and sponsor a project with this class, we've never had one say, I don't ever want to do this again. They absolutely love the experience. And we have some companies that are just downright addicted. We had actually an executive at Halliburton a few years ago that called us. He said, the hardest part about retiring is leading my project groups each semester. I look forward to working with them every semester. So that's been good. We work with these folks and tell them not, it's not like an MBA level project where we're going to do this consulting thing and give you a big report. I mean, these are freshmen and sophomores. We're lucky. Well, I'm not going to go on record in recording, but I'll tell the sponsors, hey, it's 80-20 rule. 80% of these projects are going to be awesome. 20% are going to be a learning experience, and you get to help with that. And when they have that expectation up front, they take it that way. So when a group's project really falls apart, the sponsor sits with them and says, okay, let's break down what went wrong and what can we do instead? And they help to coach them. And the companies love that experience too. And so do the students. Everybody feels good about it. So the Career Center desperately needs a place to put these projects. And then the development office, when they found out what we were doing, they're like, oh my gosh, we get so many people that aren't quite ready to give money, but we just have them at that tipping point where we need them to fall in love with the university. And so they'll come do projects, and after they do projects, they fall in love, then they want to give money. I've got a meeting this afternoon with development about somebody. They're like, we need to get them more engaged. So development has projects they have no place to put. And then the alumni office, alumni are always calling saying, how can I give back? And I'm not just talking about writing a check. How can I add meaning? How can I add to the classroom? And you can only do so many guest lectures. Projects and mentoring are huge, and there's such a demand out there in the world of how can we get engaged with helping students learn. It really is just a matter of funneling them into it. So when we decided to move in this direction, we used it as a way to build relationships. And frankly, that's part of why our placement rates went up. It's part of why our recruiting increased, because we were able to keep, like right now, the energy companies aren't hiring like they used to, which in Houston is a very big deal, but they're all doing projects because it keeps them engaged with the students. Did I stay on track, David? Did I actually answer the question, or did I get excited and go off?
No, you answered the question. I mean, you said several things that stand out to me. So I think of this in terms of things that I kind of might say when I'm talking to different schools, where schools will come to me and say, hey, where do we get projects? That's the key question. I think it's no surprise that's one of the first questions was asked here. I think it's really easy when you're recruiting projects for your students to think about it in terms of one-dimensional. Hey, we need these wins for our students, and maybe forget that there are also wins for the employer. And then you might say, well, the win for the employer is the outcome of the project. That's a win. But when we surveyed employers, we found, at least if you're talking about large companies, their primary goal was recruiting. It wasn't even the outcome. So I think it's important to remember there are these secondary benefits, and beyond secondary even, when it comes to just a larger engagement between school and employer ecosystem, that maybe the project isn't even the point in some cases, just it's another touch point. The other thing you said, I think, is super interesting, getting these other ancillary offices or business unit offices, whatever you want to call them, career offices, alumni relations development, et cetera, involved. At most schools, they have not done that yet. I think that is the future for how schools will recruit projects. A number of schools are already doing it, but it is a minority of schools currently, from what we can tell from our surveying, from our discussions. And again, that's another thing where when I talk to folks that run these programs, they might be a faculty who are kind of overburdened themselves. They have to teach these projects. They have to recruit them. Frankly, schools sometimes ask these faculty too much to do all of this on their own, as you know. But they might think, well, I want these projects for my course. I want to manage my relationships. I want to kind of hold it close to my chest, which has some issues. But they might also say, well, career office doesn't want to help me out, or alumni doesn't want to help me out, forgetting that there might be a win-win here, because there's other offices, like you said in your experience, and I have heard this from a few other schools, they want those touch points. Yeah. So it's beneficial way beyond just getting the win for the student. And it's easy to forget that when the win for the student is so substantial. You might think, well, that's all there is to this. But, I know a lot of the folks here are from business schools, and we all know about win-wins in business schools. So I think that those are all huge points. The next question you kind of already partly answered, but it was, how do you connect with the community to involve them in your projects? Is there anything you wanted to say beyond helping to recruit these extra units in the school to help you hoe that road, so to speak?
I guess the only other thing is we've had such success with this that from that, we went to all of the professors that were teaching project-based courses and said, if you could please just let us know what kind of projects you're looking for and when you need them, we'd like to put together a menu. And now we have a menu each semester that we kind of put out to everyone we work with and go, these are all of the opportunities for engagement. You can order here, or you can order a la carte if you have a different idea, and we'll try to find a faculty member. Perfect. Because there was so much demand in the community for it. And it's not just the for-profits. The nonprofits give great projects. And the other nice thing is, once they've done a project, getting them to do another one's easy, because we have a lot that just say, I just want to keep doing the same project. Because like you said, it's not like they're getting a McKinsey report. They're just getting a cute little project that some freshmen did. It's about the love and the learning. And so they'll just recycle the same project every semester, and it's pretty self-sustaining. And
they're getting brand exposure to these students at the earliest possible point, which I know, as you told me before, has been really important for that community of partners you work with. There's so much competition for sophomores right now, because by the time they hit junior and they're ready for their internships, companies have already called dibs on the best sophomores. And so companies are looking at ways to get their branding out and build relationships with younger students. So most schools I talk to, I think, would agree with that, but then they'll say, we're not ready to put the students in front. So first off, you talk about different disciplines as sort of their own vacuums, but if we're talking business schools still, historically, my experience has been, it started with, hey, we do project-based learning in the MBA. Aren't we unique and special? Well, engineering program's been doing that forever in undergrad, but it is powerful, and it was a big differentiator, and it was unique in business curriculum for a while. And then it was, hey, can we drive this down into the undergrad? And then that's where you've seen the growth in project volume, sort of exporting it from those marquee MBA programs down into the undergrad. But it was, well, okay, we'll try it in undergrad, but maybe we won't charge the employers any money now, and it's worth less, and we'll stick with just seniors. But a lot of schools will say, well, we do want to get that access to employers earlier. Like you said, it's chicken and egg issue. If you want the student to have relevant capabilities to be able to get the internship, get the job, maybe you have students that already have those connections. But if you don't, how do you provide it as a school? Well, you go earlier, you get the live employer experience, or maybe you split the difference and do live cases, as that's half of your program. What would you say about putting first year or early students way before senior year in front of employers?
You have to manage the expectations of the employers. That's important. But if the first time they're in front of employers is as a senior, then they're going to make all their mistakes when it counts. If you make a mistake as a brand new student, people forgive you because they know you just got there. I mean, we had, it was so cute. Last week, we had a student that was supposed to schedule a meeting with their sponsor. And the sponsor said, send me a meeting invite. She sent her a little, what do you call it? Now I can't think of the words. When you do like a party and you send the Evite, she sent them an Evite for the meeting. That's what it was. And so the corporate person's like, I just got an Evite to a meeting. And the student's like, well, she said send a meeting invite, and I don't know what other kind of invites to send.
Gotta learn sometime, right?
Yeah, so these are just wonderful learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Like, let's have these learning opportunities when you're brand new and people understand that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Don't do it as a senior when you're in the home stretch and you should have it figured out.
So I think what I'm hearing is manage the expectations, but that's another thing that I think for some folks that are running these programs, they want to put the school's best foot forward. They want to put the student's best foot forward, but they're also balancing that with, hey, we're trying to recruit projects. We got to fill the funnel, so to speak. And so maybe that runs counter to managing the expectations because they want to almost overpromise. But what you're saying is no, manage expectations. I've heard that from other schools too. They've had a lot of success being upfront about what they're getting, what they're not getting. Hey, this isn't work for hire. This is different for that. Even if you're collecting a fee, it's still not technically work for hire. It's different than that. Being clear about that. But then also that you're telling me employers understand sort of intuitively that, hey, I'm working with a younger student here. And so they're recalibrating on their own. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I will say, it seems to me like 70% of the professionals out there have dreamed of being a college professor. And when you say, we need you to partner with us in the learning and teaching process, these are brand new students that are learning about professionalism, teamwork, how to think through a project, and we need you to help us mentor and guide them. When you pitch it that way, they're like, yay, I'm a teacher. And if they come out as a teacher, then every mistake is a learning opportunity rather than there was a deliverable and this deliverable's bad and you're fired or whatever.
Yeah.
In fact, I had a student yesterday going, if you paid us for these projects, we'd work harder. And I'm like, well, if we paid you for the projects, we could fire you too. And there was just silence.
Double-edged sword. Yeah, I have some thoughts on a sort of paid and not paid, but I guess outside the purview of this session. There's a question from Laura Dewberry I thought was interesting. What is the role of your faculty and staff? Who is the overall coordinator for this? Which I know the answer to that, and is this staff member's only responsibility? So it's you, right? You're the overall coordinator.
I'm the lead on the course. There's a village in my office that we involve a lot of people in this. For the projects themselves, though, the sponsor of the project is responsible for coaching the students on, are they going in the right direction for the project or not? Our contractor will check in to say, have you met with them? And we'll have milestones like you need to provide an update at this time. You need to provide a draft at this time. And our contractor will check with the sponsor to say, did you get the update? Did you get the draft? And it's somewhat reactive. If a student group contacts us and says our sponsor has changed the parameters or our sponsor is not responsive, we'll get involved. If the sponsor contacts us and says my student group's unresponsive, my student group's, whatever, we'll get involved. But to some degree, they're fairly self-managing. And the case competitions are designed so the students can be fairly self-managing as well. I mean, all the milestones are in EduSourced, all of the deadlines are in there. We make sure that they're on track. but it's not like an upper level class where we're looking at every step of their work to say, oh, is this a great quality product? Can we stand behind it? And is it going to be awesome? No, sometimes it's going to stink. And I mean, we look at it, but we're not managing it like you would an upper level class. And I do want to say before I forget, the case competition is good too, because the truth of the matter is for brand new students just experiencing a large university for the first time, most of them are not quite ready to be in front of a corporate client, even with love and support. They're just mentally not ready there. So that case competition is a good option for the students that need a gentle step into working with companies and presenting their findings in front of professionals. And the other good thing about that is it takes the pressure off on the number of projects, because I don't know exactly how many students I'm going to have or exactly how many projects, but I know that the case competition will fill up as the buffer. So if I have 100 case competition teams, great. I just have to figure out how to time it so that I can get the preliminary rounds done and the final rounds done within the time that we have. And that in the past, space has been the issue. Now they pre-record it because it's virtual. Although I miss the space, that was fun.
Well, I guess that kind of brings me to a different point. What struck me as interesting about your case competition model, it isn't that there's a case competition, that's pretty common, but it's that the students self-select into the live project or the case. And I think maybe I'm missing somebody, but I think at any school I know of, they're sort of determining, okay, at this level, students are ready for case competition. At that level, students are ready for live projects. So it struck me as interesting that you say, no, you can self-select. Can you talk about your thinking behind that and how that's gone?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Question is, what was behind the decision to let students decide for themselves if they should be in a live case or in a real project?
Well, I mean, they know if they're not going to put their heart and soul into it. When we introduce the idea, we tell them, if you do a sponsored project, the upside is you get more visibility. It's something you can put on your resume. And I always kind of joke, it's a required course. I'm like, so those of you that are saying this course is a waste of my time and I'm so mad I have to take it, this is your opportunity to create value. These are opportunities, but you're accountable to a sponsor and they're going to expect you to provide a good deliverable. And they may say something like, no, you're answering the wrong question. Go back and do it again. And then your team's going to have to hustle and get it together. And because of our demographics, I'll say, if you are already working 2 jobs, a single mom, and every day you wake up and think, how am I going to hold it together? This may be more than you can take on right now. You need to ask yourself honestly, do I want this extra work? Do I want this extra stress? Because the case competition, while it's still demanding, it's more flexible. And so you need to decide what you're ready for. And after you do that, they pretty much self-select in which way they want to go.
Question from Claudia Mitch, and if I mispronounce anyone's name, I do apologize. Are all interactions virtual? You touched on that earlier, but wanted to confirm. Is that the case currently? Everything's virtual?
We are 100% virtual for all of it right now. Even our case competition, instead of doing the live presentation, they now do a 10-minute pre-recorded video that's submitted to the judges for feedback.
Okay. And the next question I have 18 million thoughts on this, as you guys can probably imagine, but you're not really here to listen to me. So I'll ask you, there are companies out there. This is from Jean Ree, by the way. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Hi, Jean.
Okay. So you know Jean. The name sounds familiar. I feel like maybe I know Jean, but I don't know. I'm having a hard time placing it.
You should know Jean.
Okay. I probably know Jean. There are companies out there that find and list projects for you. Why did you go the contractor route?
I am so glad you asked that. For us, we saw these projects as a way to deepen relationships with companies and to build our recruiting and build our partnerships. When we looked at the third parties that said, oh, if you work with us, we'll help you find projects. When we looked at the projects that they had, first of all, there weren't a lot in Texas. But secondly, the way the business model was set up, our contacts became their contacts, and they were going to be able to market to our contacts and then market our contacts projects to other schools. And since our goal was really about deepening those relationships and getting more companies in and connected to us, we really kind of wanted to keep it in-house because we didn't have a shortage of companies that we had relationships with at the university. We just weren't fully leveraging the relationships. And so by taking those weak relationships and making them stronger through projects, everybody kind of won. But if we had taken our strong relationships and then handed them over and out into the world, we risk weakening the relationships. So we had a whole faculty advisory committee reviewing all the different options for which way to go when we started looking at technology. And it was unanimous for all of our faculty across all departments that they wanted to do something that kind of helped us build the relationships and keep them in-house.
For my part, and I know you know this already, Jamie, but I don't know if it's 30, 40, or 50% of the first calls someone from my team has with the school, but they tend to think that's what we do. And I don't blame them because it's in our name. It's not good branding. I came up with the name for this company back when that was the original plan was, hey, we're going to help schools source projects, because that seems like I'm a business school student and that's a simple problem to solve. And I'm out here solving it and it has clear market implications and you can fundraise against it and et cetera. But you learn really fast that it's not sustainable. If schools turn to projects, it's for a short term, which is fine. But what my experience has been is most of these schools aren't fully utilizing these external offices, the career offices, the alumni relations, on and on. It's really just leaving it to faculty solely to source, which they may or may not have the bandwidth to do. They might have that deep Rolodex, and that's amazing, but they might not have that. Or you might have leadership at a school, engineering, business, or beyond, saying, hey, let's do more projects. And they go to their faculty, maybe somebody like you, Jamie, and they say, hey, you do this. How can we export this to others? And they find out pretty quickly that getting faculty who want to teach this and can teach this is one of the key constraints against scaling this across multiple courses. And so then the obvious thing is, well, let's use a vendor. So just to correct the record for everyone, it's not really what EduSourced does anymore. We just provide the platform. Only saying that because I feel like I have to explain that all the time. And I don't blame anyone for being confused, because it's goofy branding that Sourced is in our name. But anyway, we'll move on for that. We have a couple questions.
Actually, yes. If I could add to that,
of course.
The biggest problem we have is too much demand for projects and not enough places to put them, because the companies are so excited about working with the university and doing projects with students. And like you said, faculty don't always have the bandwidth to do it. And just to be clear, you're kind of like, well, you're a big university in a big urban area. That actually has nothing to do with it. Bear in mind, we got UT and A&M right in our backyard. We got Rice right around the corner. It's not like we've got more companies lying around. They're like, what should we do with all these companies? We have to really work at maintaining those relationships and continuing to prove ourselves just like anybody else. And so this is how we've done it. And it's how we have stayed competitive, and it's how we've kept them connected to us instead of wandering off and going to somebody else for their hiring needs and their partnering needs.
And there's so much brand equity locked up in a school that they could unleash to do these projects, extend their brand, make it really part of the school's identity, which some schools like you and other schools are doing really well, that it almost seems crazy to hand that over to a vendor to manage that relationship, in my opinion. But okay, so the next question is, I think there were a couple questions along this line, but the one I guess there's one from Monica Kurtz and one from Karen Larson, both really asking the same thing. Are you charging any kind of fee to the clients, be it the for-profits, the nonprofits, or none at all?
No, we're not charging for this. And my running joke with the sponsors is you get what you pay for. So we're not going to charge you anything. And I can't promise you that the product is going to be something that would have been worth money. And I really approach it as this is an altruistic thing that you're doing. So we expect you to give your time. We expect you to give your attention, and we expect you to be part of the learning process. With that said, many of our project sponsors have turned into donors, and their reasoning has been, we feel like we've gotten so much from the college over the years, we want to pay back. The other thing that I do is I cry and flat out say, this is something that we do as a service to the community. We don't receive funding for it. We don't get any special budget for it, but boy, we sure do appreciate any support we can get. And they typically are supportive when they can be. Like the case competitions, I tell you what, you tell a major company that you can give them 100 teams of 8 students, so 800 students, all working on a case competition sponsored by X company, they are all over that. And that's worth a lot of money to them. So they'll sponsor that case competition and give you money for it just to put their name on it. They don't even want to provide all the judges. So you can get the money for it, but I wouldn't do it for the projects unless you can guarantee that the result's going to be worth the money.
Which is why I think we've seen over the last 2 years, the number of projects that are done at no cost has gone up, because the number of projects that have happened in the undergrad relative to graduate has gone up. So as you get younger to students, you tend to charge less. And then you're kind of at the extreme tail end of that. So it's, I guess, to be expected. Melinda LaPrade, I'm very sorry, I bet I mispronounced that. Is this a 1-credit course, 3-credit course? Is it graded? Is it pass fail?
3-credit course that is graded.
Okay, so that was an easy one. Let me see. Let me switch over to some of the questions I had.
And it's required.
I feel like we've actually addressed a lot of this, so we can maybe get back into the audience questions. Well, okay, so here's a question. You have a background yourself in career offices thinking about career outcomes, and not everyone who does PBL does. They might be a faculty and they might not have that experience. Project-based learning, in our experience, continues to be something that employers love, but kind of have to be educated on. It's not like internships or co-ops that have been around for a long time that they have lots of awareness of, lots of mind share with. How do you see the future of PBL and its role with recruitment? I mean, growing, I assume growing, but maybe receding, or maybe it's fully mature now. I guess, how do you see that evolving?
I think it's huge. And for a company, internships were the thing for so long. Projects give them a chance to even test the waters even more without a major commitment from the company. In fact, one of our major companies who's been doing projects from the beginning, and it's a big company, and they send in senior executives to lead these little freshman projects. They now have hit a point where they hold aside an internship purely for someone from their project team each semester. And it's funny because when they finish the project team, they're not eligible for the internship because they're not far enough. They just hold it for a whole year for them. And that's part of their recruiting strategy now. The companies love it. The students love it. The students can put it on their resumes as an internship. Oh, and that's the other thing. This is one of our incentives to start it to begin with. Remember how I told you our kiddos couldn't do internships because they were working to pay their bills? And that's still true for a lot of them. This gives them a chance to have some kind of corporate business experience on their resume without them quitting their job.
It defeats that chicken and egg cycle.
For our kiddos. Huge. But what was even more interesting is once they had that taste of it, then they're like, I want more. And it's worth it to me to find a way to do the internships and get into industry. And so it really changed things for them, because it's one thing to say theoretically, oh, this is what it's like. But when they actually did it, it changed them. Actually, we surveyed them, and more than 80%, this is a weird question to ask in an end of class survey, more than 80% said they changed the way they thought about themselves and their approach to life as a result of being in the class.
Wow, that literally life-changing.
Yeah. And it's funny because enough people had sent us emails saying this changed my life. I'm like, we should ask the question, not thinking we'd get that many, but it was around 80%.
That's incredible. Next question's from Jody Hubert. Can you describe the rest of the course and what percentage is the project or competition? So it's either or. You're either in the competition or the project, right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, everybody's going to do the group project of some sort with corporate feedback, everyone. That winds up being about a third of the course.
Okay.
Another third of the course is focused on, the class is called Connecting Bauer to Business. And so another third of the class is actually focused on connecting with business, where we have people going to career fairs, doing resume reviews with employers, doing mock interviews, participating in informational interviews, getting LinkedIn feedback from mentors. So we actually have them engage in the process in a safe environment where they're getting feedback from people from the outside. So that's another third of the class. And then the last third of the class is your traditional career development stuff, kind of like, let's do self-assessment, let's learn how to write a resume. But unlike most career courses, that's only a third of the content. Then we've got that third that's career course, a third that's connecting, and a third that's let's do this, let's do the group project.
There was a question if this will be recorded and sent out. Yes. So this will be recorded. It'll be posted at edusourced.com. It'll be under the Experiential Academy tab. So if you join that, and then you can enter your email, we won't spam you a whole bunch. We'll just send you info about posts and sessions like this. So you could do that, or you could just watch the recording there. It will be posted. Got a few other questions here. Gene asks again, what is at the core of your pitch to sponsors? Have you seen more success targeting outreach to recruiters versus hiring managers? Oh, I love that question.
That's a great question. And it's funny because the recruiters get excited, but the hiring managers run it. So we haven't had to sell it that much. In the very beginning, We would do things like at the career fair, we'd put a flyer on every booth just to kind of say, hey, we got this thing. And we would do like an email out to everybody going, hey, we got this thing. And then our employer advisory board, we kind of jumped all over them with, hey, we got this thing and you need to help. But most of it has really been inbound with companies saying, how can I get more involved? And if you work with career services, alumni relations, or development, you know that is the number one question you hear all the time. How can I get more involved? How can I help students? Because they know the university's first question is going to be how much money you got. And if you got an answer other than write me a check, they get so excited. And so it really hasn't been hard as long as you are ready with kind of like a one-sheeter on this is how it works. And they need some samples of these are the types of projects you can do. But when we explain it to them, the recruiters are like, let me find you someone. And then the hiring managers have the time are like, oh, this is fun. Let me get other people. And so
Awesome.
they keep, and even like when people are like, I'm leaving the company, but I'm putting this person in charge of the projects going forward, because they really do kind of get addicted to that sense of I'm shaping lives. I'm preparing the next generation. Like I said, everybody kind of dreams of being a college professor, but without the grading. It's like the best part of college professor.
Yeah, it's like having grandkids that you send home.
Yeah. No grade appeals, no grading.
Right. None of that.
Actually, that's the truth. They do grade. We have a rubric, and the rubric is published, so the students know exactly what it's going to be, and they do fill in the rubric.
The client does. What percentage of the grade is that?
That one grade is not a huge, I think it works out to less than 10% of the grade.
It's typically 5 to 15% we found.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right in the strike zone. There was one school I came across that was 50%, which I thought was interesting. But for you, this is already just a third of the course anyway, so it makes sense. Yeah. What you just said to me speaks to my earlier question about where do you see this going? The fact that the employers you work with are so enthusiastic about it tells me they're going to learn to start to expect it and ask for it. And I think we're still in that world where I could be wrong about this, but I suspect employers aren't really going to schools and asking for it. It's more, they have to learn about it and then they get excited. But I think there will be a tipping point. I wouldn't be surprised if we hit it soon. But the fact that they're enthusiastic, they're telling their colleagues, I mean, obviously that's how stuff spreads. So that's exciting. We've got
they do cold call. Like I got a call the other day from this lady with a nonprofit, and she said, boy, she knew how to pull my string. She said, hey, I want to do a project. I already did this project with UT, but I want to do it with UT. I'm like, well, dang it. Nice. Now I got to come up with a faculty member because you're not going to tell me UT can do it and I can't.
Yeah. Which UT was it? Did she specify?
UT Austin.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't work with UT Austin yet, but that would have been funny. Okay, so question from Jonathan Pierce. It's kind of a long one, so we'll try to work through this. So my college is in a very small community, and it's 30 minutes away from larger communities. That said, so kind of rural, I guess. That said, I can see how your program could be tailored to my needs. With that in mind, what would you say are some steps? He says 5 steps, but I would just say, what are some steps in creating or starting on a homegrown project-based learning program that you run yourself like you have? And additionally, do you have any formal agreements you use with employers?
I know I should. I don't think I should say on tape that I don't, but I don't.
We'll cut that out in the recording.
Every now and then they'll ask for an NDA, but yeah, we don't. We watch over what's happening, but it's one of those things, no money's changed hands, no promises were made. If anybody's unhappy, we stop the game. But when we started, we actually started with a handful of companies that we knew and we trusted. And we reached out and said, this is a pilot. We want you to try it with us. We're going to see if it works or not. And so for us, a handful was 25, but we're huge. But it was 25 companies that we worked really closely with. We knew the recruiters and the hiring managers really well. They trusted us, we trusted them, and we were able to experiment. The nice thing is it can all be done virtually. So they don't need to drive the 30 minutes to your campus. The students can meet with them virtually. They can do their follow-up virtually. You can do all of your document exchange and reviews virtually. People don't have to come to campus, and the final presentation can be done virtually. And even before COVID, we would have companies that were in other states that were sponsoring programs with our students as a way to build engagement and branding from another state, and they never physically came to campus. And so if you start with your close friends, and then you get some outcomes data from that and some examples that you're able to use to sell to people that are kind of not quite as close friends, but you'd like them to be close friends, you slowly build up over time. And the other thing you start to do is get really picky about who do you want to do the projects with? Because now that we've done it for a while.
But that comes later, right? That's not day one, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So starting, see if I understand. So starting with a core sort of insular group of folks that that you trust, that you can experiment with,
Yeah.
and then building it just outward from there. And then, of course, as you mentioned earlier, getting other people at the school that have a vested interest in this kind of thing involved. So it's not just this silo over here. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, and if you start with your career center and or development office or alumni office and just say, I need 5 projects that would look like this, who should we call? And, it'd probably be 7 phone calls to get 5 projects if you start with your closest friends.
Yeah, great. So Gene actually asked a question I think is a good follow-up to this. So he asked, when did you pilot this or launch it? And what are some challenges you faced and what would you have changed?
I should have known the answer to this before I got on the phone. It's been about 12 years, I think. We've been doing this a long time. And when we piloted it, we mostly did the case competition. We did the case competition before we added the projects. So we already had that running. We tried other things before we got the case competitions to work. When we did the first ones, I think we expected higher deliverables from the students than we got, and we expected a higher level of professionalism than we had. And it was useful learning because we needed to know that our students were doing things like sending evites instead of sending an out-like invite,
Right.
Things that we didn't anticipate that we should have. So we learned those things. And then from that, since it was our friends and they were able to say, hey, this is what happened. Then when we reached out to people to solicit, we were able to say, these are the types of learning experiences you may encounter, so they don't freak out.
Well, you told me before that you started off and this was small. You didn't start off with 1,000 students working with live projects or even half of them or any number of them. But then you said that you took the large course and you iterated it until it achieved the same measured outcome as the very small 30 student. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So that was back before we had the group projects as they are. In the beginning, we just wanted to see, we had the case competition group projects, but before we had the sponsor group projects, people said that we couldn't do what we wanted to do with the kind of the personal career development and then the outward employer networking and experience on a large scale, that it just couldn't be done. And I love it when people tell me I can't do something. And so what we did was I created a section of 30 students that was like the normal, we're going to do career development, hold your hand and get to know you. And then I created another section of 800. And we did slightly different things in each one and measured the outcomes for each one. And it took us maybe 3 semesters before our outcomes data looked the same for 30 versus 800. And once the outcomes data was the same, we got rid of the 30 and we just started going large. One of the benefits of large is access to employers, frankly. If I tell a CEO of a company, I can give you an audience of 500 college students, they will show up and do a talk. Yeah. And, when it was 1,000, it was even better. I could make CEOs get on a panel for 1,000.
There you go.
For 500, you got to give them a solo slot. But if you say, 1,300 students will see your project and the type of work you're doing, and they're sophomores and they'll know your name. And then when they go to career fair a month later, they'll know your name. They're even more likely to give the project. So there were a lot of benefits to scaling. And the other thing that happened was they were like, if you do this giant class, you're just adding to that idea that big state schools are so impersonal and blah, blah, blah. But we put them in that 8-person team almost immediately. And probably half of their deliverables are done in that 8-person team. And so they get to be really good friends. And that's made a huge difference. It has connected them to the college.
And that's at the point at which you connect them with a mentor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that mentor
this year? Because in the past with the group projects, bonding happened over staying up till 2 a.m. over pizza, figuring out what are we going to do because we have a deliverable tomorrow.
Sure.
And we don't have that virtually. So the mentor, a lot of it was to make them all get together, put together some get to know you games, ask them questions, get them talking, but kind of force that interaction so that they start to make friends.
That's almost counterintuitive. I wouldn't have expected that. So the fact that it's remote lessens the need with your program to add that mentor component, and it's more the students will be self-sufficient. Is that
no? It increased the need. That's why we added the mentors, because we went online.
Oh, I thought okay. I was confused. I thought I heard the opposite.
They're not until 2 a.m. in their dorm rooms anymore.
You now need the mentor. Yeah, I gotcha. And who are these mentors? Where are they coming from? What does a typical mentor look like?
So we have one of our career counselors is running that program, and frankly, he reached out to a lot of his personal network. But we reached out to our employer advisory board, and we reached out to our alumni board. So we've all got a lot of different kind of alumni. We started with our alumni boards because these are people we've worked a long time with, and we know what they'd be like as a mentor. So we kind of went through recruiters we love, alumni we love, people we know, and we said, if you're interested, fill out this form, because if you're not willing to fill out a form, you're not going to put in the time to do this right. And then we said, you got to come to an orientation, because if you won't come to the orientation, you're not going to do this right. So those are truly our first two screens. Would you fill out a form and go to an orientation?
So it's a weed out class for mentors.
It was. So we had 150 people express interest. We got it down to 117, which is what we needed in the fall. And we had to swap out like 2 of them early on because they were like, oh, you wanted me to do stuff with my time, but we had backups. And nice. It worked really well. And we learned a lot from our first experience in the fall, and we're continuing it this spring. And we had students last semester that said, in the COVID environment, they said having a mentor was the one thing that made me feel connected in this whole horrible quarantine situation. And that made me both sad and happy.
Yeah. And it helps you manage the sheer scale of everything. It kind of localizes everything down in a way that there's buffer aside from just what the faculty has to deal with, aside from what you have to deal with.
Well, and they need to feel cared for, because we do know, we know having a friend makes you graduate faster and make better grades, but we know feeling closely connected to your professor does it too. That ain't going to happen. If I got 1,300 students, it ain't going to happen. If I know you, it's probably a bad thing. But with the mentor or the sponsor, you get that same experience of one person is deeply interested in the learning of 8 people and who they are and how they're developing and what they're doing. So you get that same experience of, I have an authority figure that cares about my learning.
Yeah, amazing. Question, and I'm going to really mess this name up. So sorry. Amy Van Esseldelft, Amy V. Amy, thank you for your question. How do you maintain these client relationships, and are there some best practices that you use?
So we do have a contractor that manages those relationships each year. And so she kind of keeps tabs on them and she reaches back out. We feed her leads and we'll say, hey, if you're interested, we're going to have this person reach out to you to finalize everything. So really the contractor has taken the responsibility for managing the relationships with the sponsors. And our counselor has taken responsibility for managing the relationship with the mentors. And really in those cases, though, if you've got someone in your alumni office and you do alumni mentors, someone in the alumni office will gladly keep track of those mentors. And if you're doing the projects through your Career Center, someone in the Career Center Employer Relations Group will gladly keep track of those sponsor relationships. So you don't have to do it all by yourself.
Similar question from Karen. Do you have any onboarding or training for these companies or project supervisors, whether it be through your contractor, through you? What does that look like?
So our contractor sits with each one of them to kind of talk to what to expect and what's expected of you. And so she does one-on-one meetings with each of them. Group meeting, they're all so different that one-on-one seem to work better for us, but like we do group training for the mentors and that works fine. So we could do group meetings for the sponsors. We've just chosen not to.
A question from an anonymous user or viewer. It was mentioned that groups bid on assignments. How does that work? So I think they're talking about when they bid on the projects themselves. Do you want to explain? Because your process is actually pretty unique for that. Most schools don't do that. And I don't think it is a fit for most schools, but because of your scale, it makes sense for you. But do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I know y'all had to customize a lot for us to make it work. So we post all the projects and we tell them, it used to be first come, first serve sign up, which kind of worked the same way, but we'll tell them, okay, at 9:00, you can bid on a project and you can choose your first, second, third choice. And the algorithm, the way I understand it, kind of looks at who asked first and, where was your choices and how many people.
Yeah.
But we run that bid after about a half an hour and it lets the students know, okay, you either got into this particular project that was on your choices or you didn't get into a project. If they didn't get into a project, we'll say, okay, these are the spaces still available. We're going to open the bid again. And then they have a chance to bid first, second, third of those that are still available. And then if they don't all fill, we do a third round. And so if a project doesn't fill after 3 rounds, we'll ditch the project because it means nobody really wants to do it.
Yeah.
And once the project bidding is done and people are in the projects that they chose to some degree, everyone that's left over, we kind of push a button and it assigns them into a case competition team. And so I always joke with them, if you just want to do a case competition, wait until Friday morning and it'll be like Christmas. You'll wake up, you'll go outside, you go, what team am I on? And you'll have all your new friends waiting for you in the computer.
Perfect. So do you have any advice on measuring outcomes? That's something that I think a lot of folks struggle with, measuring the outcomes of these experiential programs. And you can take that however you want. Is it the program that you need to measure the outcome in? Is it the project? Do you have any advice on that or thoughts on that?
I mean, well, like with any academic program, you start with your learning goals and you have to assess based on those learning goals. But in our case, we not only had learning goals, we also had specific outcomes we were trying to achieve in terms of we wanted to drive engagement in student organizations. We wanted to drive volunteering. We wanted to drive internships. We wanted to drive job search behavior. And so we surveyed that, but we also measured that. And so we were able to see the increase in engagement in all of those areas, which was something we wanted to accomplish. In our case, we also wanted to deal with soft skills, and we wanted the perception of employers had of our soft skills to change. And so we were able to measure that as well. But typically you're going to start by assessing your learning goals. And that's how we got some of that self-assessment, like a 20% increase in self-perception of their verbal presentation skills, because we were like, are you more confident? And we will ask them, we'll ask at the beginning of the class and again at the end, how confident are you in your ability to convey your skills and abilities to an employer in a way that they will understand in a resume or in a way they will understand in an interview? And we figure out where they are on the way in and we ask them again on the way out. We did one semester where we looked at the videotape mock interviews. We did a pre and post and we just looked at them, which is miserable with the rubric, and evaluated the improvement in the score. And we saw a significant improvement in the score. And it was such a miserable process. We never did that exercise again, but it was fun to do once.
Interesting. So where do you go from here? What's next? Do you feel like your program has reached maturity and you're satisfied with the outcome, which is perfectly fine? Are there things that you feel are deficiencies that you want to improve? How do you see this evolving, if evolving, or has it already evolved?
It's evolved and then the world changed. So now we will be offering, as of this fall, an online BBA as a fully online degree program that's not COVID based. And so we're going to have to figure out how to take the best of what we did during COVID and target that to our online BBAs while still doing what we used to do for our in-persons, because so far in our measurements, we're getting great results from the online class, but we got better results from the in-person. And so the next step will be, how do we raise up those online results to be more comparable to the in-person results so our online degree students can have similar outcomes and experiences? If anybody has the magic answers, call me.
Well, everybody should have your info after this, and of course can look you up on LinkedIn too, additionally. One question I feel like is thematically similar to a lot of the other questions that came in, maybe a little bit different. What are the best practices to keep clients engaged? We talked about onboarding, we talked about recruitment, but now they're here. How do you keep them engaged? And I would add to this, especially, and this, like it says, from anonymous users, so I don't have a name to report, but what I would add to that is, how do you do that when you're at scale? Because I think if I'm talking to a faculty that runs 5 projects at a time, the answer is usually, I'm just going to talk to them regularly. But how do you do it when you're at such large scale?
Yeah, you have to automate a lot of it, just like everything else. And so sending automated messages on a regular basis during the course of the projects, sending automated messages when it's over, that, it's not as personalized, but it makes sure that you're getting feedback from them. It makes sure that they know what's going on. Again, in our case, I hired a contractor just because for me that made more sense, because I'm not full-time faculty. I've got a bunch of other roles. But that automation helps, because you can make EduSourced automatically send them messages and surveys and things like that as you go along. so that they are reminded and kept in touch. We used to host a reception, and it was funny because one of our project sponsors used to sponsor the reception. It was a consulting company, and they saw the other companies that were sponsoring projects and realized they wanted to build branding with
That's
these
interesting.
sponsors. So they would sponsor a reception every year for all the project sponsors and all the students that did the sponsor project. So we had a big party at the end of each semester to go, yay, aren't we great? And that was kind of nice too. But then that sponsor moved, and so we haven't done it since.
That was in the spirit of that. That's why we built that Project Health feature. And I know some schools look at it and use it for their clients and get in client engagement. And just for people watching who aren't users of ours, that's where different stakeholders in the project can report how they feel things are going at any time on demand. But system will also remind them if it's been a while, hey, we haven't heard from you. How are things going? And it's a conduit from, say, a client or a mentor or a student to the faculty or whomever is running the program. And some schools will say, well, we don't want to bother the client, so we don't want them ever to get emailed. And, I can understand that. I know people are busy, but I really do suspect that a lot of schools are a little overly cautious about engaging the client because, like you said at the beginning, there's so much value in this often for the project client. And sometimes, and I hear this from project clients, they want to be more engaged, not less. They sometimes feel a little cut out of the process. That's just my thoughts on it. Are there any parting thoughts you want to share, Jamie, or anything else you don't feel you got to? Or do you feel like we're good? I know we're at the hour.
Yeah, I think we covered a whole lot of ground.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thanks everybody in the audience too. I very much appreciate you guys coming out. I hope this was helpful. And thanks for everyone who submitted questions. So the recording will be up in a couple of days. I mentioned earlier at the Experiential Academy on EduSourced. So feel free to check that out. Of course, you share links with folks and hit the sign up button at the top of that page if you want to be notified of future events or things. Thanks so much, Jamie. Really do appreciate your time and your wisdom on all of this.
Oh, thanks, David.
My pleasure as always. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.